good. It's a triple-double for Bella Earl.
Goes matched up with a speedy guard. Great screen, spin move, layup, he missed it. Williamson fights for the board. His putback is good.
It is Tarleton State women's basketball preview week on the Straight Outta Whack podcast as we start finishing up our last couple of teams before opening night. Joining us on a Monday morning is the Texans, voice of the Texans, Clayton Neville. Clayton is the WAC's lone full-time radio play-by-play voice. Clayton, thanks for joining us.
Daryl, appreciate it. Thanks for having me back. Looking forward to the season.
Yeah, last year was a banner year for the Texans' first Division I national postseason appearance as they earned a berth to the WNIT. Second straight year with a Division I postseason conference win with that first-round win in the WAC tournament over Southern Utah. A win over Arkansas State, who eventually earned the right to represent the Sun Belt in the NCAA tournament, much to most people's surprise, I thought. But it's a kind of a rebuild in Stephenville with one returning starter in the second-team All-WAC selection, Jacoria Long, and three other reserves who saw decent amounts of minutes, and a Texan roster that has heavily been revamped through the portal with, I believe it's 11 total newcomers.
Yeah, that's right. 3 returners total. Jacoria Long obviously leading the way on that. And then you've got Mimi Willis in there too. She's one of the returners. She was a freshman last year. And then Kai Jones is the other one who's coming back. Other than those 3, everybody else is new. However, Jacoria Long, as you know, was one of the stars for that team last year. So having her as one of the 3 returners back, that's obviously a plus for this team. But, you know, Coach Brock, Coach Golden, and the coaching staff at Tarleton, they've been through this before, only having a small number of returners back and having to kind of start from scratch. And it's not like this team is starting from zero like they were several years ago. I mean, they have built the momentum. They have built a lot of excitement within the program. And that should lead to like a whole nother tier of players, is kind of what we're seeing here. In the portal, you talk about Tarleton losing some players, but I think we'll see that they have got some benefits from the portal too.
Last year, obviously a dream season for the Texans. Looking at 25-26, a revamped WAC field with just 7 teams and the departures of defending champion GCU and Seattle. What do you think we can expect from this WAC race that'll start just before New Year's Eve and wind its way to March?
I think it's going to be a little bit more competitive just because you have GCU out of there. And I mean, it was clear, right? They were a step above, it seemed like. And so now I think the competitiveness of the conference will get a little bit tighter. However, so is the number of teams getting a little bit tighter. So what have you got? You're playing everybody 3 times, basically?
Yeah.
You're going to most places twice or having people to your place twice. So it is going to be a different dynamic. But I do think that it will be more competitive overall, just with GCU being gone and with still having the teams in Texas, obviously, UTA, ACU, and Tarleton State. That threesome's not going anywhere. And I think that's pretty competitive always.
When you look at last year's story, obviously one of the goals that Brock had was to get old and stay old. He did that for a couple of years, and I think now we're in this space in college basketball where you're going to be able to do that for a couple of years, and then once that group graduates, you're kind of at a space where you're kind of at okay, I still want to get old, stay old, but there might be a year in between getting there, right?
Yeah, the turnover is way different, certainly, than it used to be. It's a different ball game. And just from the outside looking in, I would say that the approach to that Tarleton has taken and that other schools have taken is just build the program, build what these coaches have to offer, build the different pluses off the court, that may be attractive to a girl looking to come to a particular school. Continue to just hammer the fact that this is a program on the up and up. And I think you'll continue to get solid athletes in there. It's building that program. And already in what's going to be the 3rd year now under this regime, I think they've started to do that. They've built a reputation, not just in Stephenville, but really across the country to some level.
Obviously, with the dawning of a new year comes the dawning of a new arena. The EECU Center opens up for that exhibition against Kansas State, who's been in the NCAA tournament the last couple of years, the first to make the visit. Let's talk about the buzz around that exhibition, which will be in about 3 weeks here.
Yeah, really looking forward to that. We're going to have that on the Tarleton Sports Network, by the way. Typically, we don't have exhibition games, broadcast. I'll just go down there and kind of get familiar with the team and all of that. But this one's going to be on the airwaves, being, of course, the first women's game from the EECU. I got my first glance at the EECU a couple days ago. Actually, I went down to Stephenville. I come out of the Metroplex to go down to Stephenville. And, man, it is state of the art. Like, I was thinking in my head, there's probably like a menu of arenas, like either state of the art, the second tier, the third, or the fourth. Somebody ordered the best one you can get, I think, because I went in there and there was literally athletes doing the treadmill pool inside the arena. So it's just they've got it all. They've got a media room in there. They're right up there with all the arenas in the WAC now. ACU, Cal Baptist, I'd say they're right up there at the top.
And then obviously arenas are a recruiting tool, and that's got to help on that front too, having a venue that is going to seat 5,000, I think is what they said its capacity is going to be, somewhere in that
or
area.
Upward. Yeah, but it's intimate, but it's big at the same time.
Obviously looking at the Texans non-conference schedule, the exhibition against K-State stood out. So too, taking part in that Abilene Christian MTE over the Christmas holiday. Talk about getting to stay in Texas and getting a couple quality opponents, Buffalo, the defending NIT champion, and then Montana, who, boy, howdy, they came as close as you could get to the NCAA tournament last year.
So you're going to get those two teams in Texas from out of Texas, and then the non-conference also brings Texas A&M, TCU, and Texas State. I was talking to the coaching staff about it when I was down in Stephenville the other day. In years past, Tarleton's tried to play up in competition just like you would do as you're growing a program. And this year's no exception, except this year they were able to figure it out where they could do it with a relatively easy travel schedule. Texas is a state where it has, the big programs. It's got the A&Ms, the TCUs, Texas State, like a mid-major right there. Last year, Tarleton played Nebraska. Who else? In the past, they went over to El Paso, other big schools. Went down to Austin to play UT last year. But this year, they can do a lot of it in a very, very close space, including those games in Abilene over the break that are really going to be exciting. All of that action happening, relatively close to Stephenville. Yeah,
and next year, from what ACU folks have told me, the Texans will be hosting that MTE too. So it's like a trade-off.
Yeah, and that's great. And both of those venues are really solid. When you think about those two programs, just a shot down I-20, pretty similar looking campuses, certainly similar arenas now. And, they're building the reputation for Central Texas or West Central Texas.
When you went back to Stephenville the other day, did you sense a buzz around town? Hey, we've got ourselves a solid Tarleton State women's program that was a WNIT program last year. Let's buy those season tickets up and support them as they try to take the next step.
Yeah, I think so. And of course, that goes for the men's program as well. And that also goes for the events that are being held at the EECU. I do radio in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, and Tarleton is now on the radar in the Metroplex. I don't know, 5-10 years ago, maybe you've heard of it, but not really at this level. Now people are talking about going to the Co-Wetzel concert down at the EECU. Comedians are playing down there, that kind of thing. So it's really marketing itself not only as the venue for the Texans, but just as a spot for Central Texas. And that in itself is growing Tarleton. I've been so impressed with the growth, the dedication by Dr. Hurley into this program. I don't know what it looks like on the national level yet, just because I'm too close to it here in Texas. But as far as the state level, Tarleton's on the radar and continuing to just blip that radar, it seems like every day.
Well, nationally, you got to think the profile of the Texans, right? They won the baseball tournament in the WAC a couple years ago. They're turning heads right now in football, right? Undefeated, survived a little bit of a scare from Southern Utah over the weekend, but hey, undefeated, still undefeated, right? And I think they're fourth in the most recent FCS poll.
Yeah. Big win early on in the season too. So yeah, it's great. It's great to see that team build. But it makes sense, right? When you invest in a program, when you get all the right pieces together, when you put a coach like Bill Brock behind the women's basketball program, you're just putting the pieces in place. Then odds are it's going to come together, and it's fun when it does.
When he came in, what kind of expectations did you have about how quickly he could make this program viable? Because when he came in, it was at the a pretty low spot. I mean, they won 2 games the previous year?
Yeah, I think 3 games at the most that previous year. Maybe, I think, you know what, maybe it was just 2. But yeah, whatever it was, they were coming off one of the worst years. They needed to turn it around. They had already made the decision to start investing in the program, clearly, as they went to Coach Brock. I think my biggest concern with that was I hope they turn it around fast so he stays with it and keeps growing this program. Towards the end of that first season, he did. There was somewhere in the latter half of that first season, even though it wasn't as many wins as maybe he wanted, where it started to click. You started to see the girls buy into it. That carried over into the offseason. And that was the case the entire season last year. They bought in from the beginning to the end. And now it looks like that reputation is going to be able to get them some more talent that hopefully can just add to the progression that he's been making. But I think my number one thing was I hope he does have success quickly so he stays with it. Not that he would give up or anything like that, but he's an older coach who's been there before. I mean, he's accomplished a lot in his coaching career. I think my number one thing is he going to continue to have the desire? I mean, he does. He loves coaching, obviously, and it's paying off too, and that helps.
With this revamped WAC format, obviously, there's a trend. The trend statistically is that teams that do well in the WNIT or the WBI have pretty solid follow-up seasons, right? You think of CBU in 2023-24 winning the WBI, right, and parlaying that into an NCAA tournament appearance the next year. How much do you feel like there's a pressure on the group to kind of follow that up just because of how new a lot of them are to either starting roles or just completely new to the program?
Yeah, I think that what we were talking about in the sense that it is an up and coming program, there may be a little bit pressure just to keep that going themselves as the players. But at the same point, I think that Coach Brock and the other coaches instill a confidence in the players that, you're here for a reason. And also, they treat their players very well. They treat their broadcasters well, too. If you notice, every time you see me, I've got Tarleton swag on. And that kind of stuff makes a big difference, right? The feel of the program and that kind of thing. So I would think that it would be there a little bit, but it might be a good kind of pressure. We'll see as the season goes on. But I do think there are expectations within the program now. Yeah.
Looking at the roster that, graduated and moved on, I mean, obviously, Elise Turbiadis at South Dakota now, Faith Acker ended up at Oklahoma State. Those are some big losses, right, that this group is just going to have to fill, especially on the offensive end. But, the biggest thing for the Texans has always been, can they compete on the defensive end? That's what they did last year, and that's what they parlayed into a lot of those wins. Yeah,
that's absolutely right. And, it's just next player stepping up. And they've got some key players coming onto the roster. I would look to the former Mean Green players or the players that I look to kind of fill the void of those 2 spots, not necessarily in positions. Faith Acker was the center position, and Turbiadis also was in the trenches too. But when you just look at like those energy players, Brackens from North Texas is a big one. And then Gia Adams, if you remember, she was at UTA.
She was the newcomer of the year in 23-24.
Yeah, a couple of years ago. And now she's on the Texans. So, again, it's those pickups during the offseason that, in college basketball, you think, okay, I think that looks good, but we'll see exactly how it pans out. The potential in the offseason acquisitions is pretty big, I think, for the Texans.
Yeah, you talked about Gia Adams. I remember the day that they put her signing out, I was randomly scrolling through social media and just, one of those refresh Twitter things that popped up. And I was like, wait a minute. Wasn't she at UT Arlington?
Yeah, she was. North Texas as well. And then now coming back. And the portal makes everything so interesting. And then throwing in that COVID year. Now that we're like 5 years removed from COVID, it always interests me when it's like, wait, they still have a COVID year to spend. I just lose track of who's still eligible. Just tell me if they're still eligible. It's a weird landscape. Yeah, I think that sense of it might calm down a little bit. I don't know if the jumping around everywhere is going to change. I think we might be in that forever. But as far as it seems like she's been around forever and been on like 5 different teams. I think we're in the thick of that right now.
Yeah, I think the COVID year, we're kind of at the tail end of the players with that extra COVID year of eligibility.
Yeah. And Jacoria Long is one of those too. And that was a benefit for Tarleton.
Yeah. And we should start to see regression back to normal in terms of eligibility in that regard. Clayton, this is the last year, obviously, of the WAC in its current form. The 3 Texas schools are going to rebrand to the UAC with the 5 ASUN playing football schools starting next year. When you think back to the Tarleton era in the WAC, what comes to mind? Is it just a place to get a Division I program started and off the ground?
I think it's more than that, just my experience. And that's really all I can talk about, right? Is just, the broadcaster and going to the different arenas and the competition that I've seen within the WAC. I don't know the whole ins and outs and how the administrators or coaches were treated or all that kind of stuff. But I was impressed from the WAC. I was by the WAC. I really was. I think that they would be more than a bottom level conference. I think that they gave Tarleton a lot of exposure. They seemed like a pretty good fit, at least for Tarleton, as far as the getting on the radar and growing the reputation. I mean, they do things right? Tarleton does things big. I felt like the WAC did things big from the tournament was always fun in Las Vegas. The branding I thought was always pretty on par. So at least from my perspective, I thought that at least as a jumping point, the WAC was great for Tarleton.
Do you have a trip or trips that you're not going to particularly miss next year when you guys move over to that UAC?
I mean, the first time I went to Phoenix, I enjoyed it because it was Phoenix. But every time after that, it was more just about Grand Canyon and rolling your eyes at the students there. And that just has to do with the fact that they were so big in the culture and atmosphere they had there. I don't think I'll miss going to GCU. I will miss going to Seattle. I loved Seattle. I loved that university. I like that city a lot. Good for them that they're kind of moving up, as far as their conference is concerned. But I would say that Seattle's the one that I'm going to miss. I like the Utah trips a lot. I'm glad those aren't going anywhere, at least for another year.
Yeah, the Seattle, obviously, when you talk to a lot of people last year, that was the popular one that people said they were going to miss. When you look at this program, obviously, you have the veteran in Bill Brock. Just talk about how he gets players to gravitate towards the Texan program, and just how big it is to have somebody with that level of savvy in the chair in a program that's slowly rising through Division I. In a way, it's still kind of a new program to the Division I ranks, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that his reputation obviously helps a lot, being the fact that he was with Baylor for so long and accomplished everything that he did with the national championships there. But also, once the players sit down with Coach Brock, I think he can sell them there. It's not like he's like overly, come here, or anything like that. It's just that he is a basketball guy. He's confident in himself, and he's got the chops to back it up. And I think that goes a really long way for a lot of these players when they see, oh, man, that wisdom and that expertise could benefit me, if they are a player that buys into it. And then as far as the Tarleton coaching staff goes, Coach Golden and Coach Mo, those are two extremely vital pieces to that program when it comes to on the court, but also off the court in recruiting and building the program and boosting the confidence of the players. Coach Golden and Coach Mo both, but Coach Golden has one player specifically who was at North Carolina, Luca. She's a new player on the team. Not North Carolina, Northern Colorado, obviously, where Coach Golden was several years ago. Stayed in communication with her, and now she's making her way down to Tarleton. And there's several other, recruiting connections between those two coaches that have landed certain players here. And that, too, is going to make a big difference. So it's really just the coaching staff as a whole. Bill Brock is huge, but Coach Golden and Coach Mo are pretty critical, too.
I think you're seeing that across mid-major basketball as a whole, right? You may not have signed it with a program, or you played somewhere for an assistant coach. That assistant moves somewhere else, and lo and behold, you remember, that assistant's now somewhere else. Oh, let me go look at that program and see what they're all about. And, you look at ACU, right? One of their transfers from the College of Charleston, where Chris Garcia had a previous stop. Yannick Denson had a previous stop. She followed him to Abilene. Same kind of deal.
Yeah, and I mean, even Gia Adams, Tarleton was probably on her radar from several years ago at UTA, but maybe not before that. And then two players who went to North Texas, going south from Denton to Stephenville. Those weren't necessarily on the same page in previous years, but now they are. For two players to make the switch from the University of North Texas, which is a big boy, down to Tarleton, that kind of shows you right there the connection and just the dynamics and the logistics that are starting to change.
Is that like moving from big brother to little brother in a way?
Well, certainly as far as like geographic, city, like big city wise, yeah, Denton, it's right there in the Metroplex, and it's huge. And UNT is a large school. I would say around, it's got to be at least 50,000 by now, if not more. Don't quote me on that. But then you've got Tarleton, which is growing rapidly. And I don't know if have this stat or not, but Tarleton is now over 21,000 in student enrollment. Several years ago, they were at like 12.
And that's full-time equivalent?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's impressive. Obviously, it's one of the fastest growing year over year in the country. And
yeah,
you see on social media all the time that they're adding the buildings and the facilities and the programs to match that demand. And that certainly helps in attracting high level student athletes with a variety of majors, right? Talk about how NIL and all these weird things off the court affect recruiting to you in the women's basketball space, because like you see it all the time, right? And you hear coaches talk about women's budgets aren't the same as men's budgets, women's revenue isn't the same as men's revenue. So just talk about how mid majors are affected by that kind of lack of revenue and those sorts of things.
Yeah, I haven't seen a whole lot of it being at a mid-major women's college basketball program. I haven't seen, players just raking in the money or making it rain on the bus or anything like that. I haven't seen any of that kind of stuff. What I have seen, though, I think is more opportunity. It looks like it's almost like it's being approached almost more like a business, even if it's not cash. It's more of just like marketing yourself. And it could be in a negative way. I haven't seen it play out in a negative way in Tarleton because I also see the team element among the girls. But it does seem more now than it used to be like, where is my brand going from here? Where is my product going from here? What could I do? What are the potentials? What are the opportunities? And that's not right or wrong, right? That's just what it is, I guess.
And then obviously, the rebrand to the UAC. Do you see the UAC as kind of a permanent home, or as like a stepping stone to something, Conference USA, the Mountain West, as people have been scuttlebutting about the last several months?
I mean, again, from the outside looking in, would view it as another stepping stone, maybe like a temporary home of the next 5 years to a decade without having any idea as to how long or anything like that. I would just guess that Tarleton's going to continue to grow. Would this conference and this level of growth be satisfactory forever? I would say probably not by the administrators at this point, but I think that in the immediate, this is like the next goal. I don't know if they have any further goals from this today, but I do think that they continue to grow after this.
Talk about some of your, what are we, 27 days or so to opening day, and that first, those first officially countable games. Talk about some of the things you're going to be looking for from this team on these first couple of broadcasts. Obviously, just with as young as this team is in experience, I mean, together, right? I mean, there is Division I experience here, just not as a togetherness as a group, right?
Yeah. And I think that's going to be the key in the first few games to watch. I don't think that you can have a program who has the number of new players that they do and only 3 returners and not look to the chemistry and not say, well, that's going to have to be the thing that comes together. It may right away. Full practices started just a couple weeks ago. From what I hear, the team is gelling, pretty well together. I've only had about 1 day to talk to some of the players and coaches in that, down there in Stephenville. But it seems like it's coming along. It seems like that process is something that they know is important and are working to achieve that chemistry. But the other thing is, I feel like they may have just more raw talent this year than they have had in the past 2 years that I've been with the program and in all of the Bill Brock regime in the last 3 years.
I think what I'm looking for first and foremost is who steps into kind of a leadership role, obviously with, the Turbiotis is gone and Ariana Rosborough gone. Who steps into kind of that leadership role? The second thing I'm looking at is who's going to pick up the scoring load that Faith Acker vacated. Obviously, they added Tessa Engelman, who was one of the best shot blockers in the MAC. I believe she was like 5th or 6th in the MAC in shot blocking last year. I'm curious to see what she can do on the offensive end to help kind of pick up the pieces that Faith Acker left behind.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the center position is going to be key to see, who can fill that void. And I don't think we know that yet. I think there's several different options there. I think Coach Brock has done a good job bringing players like Luca and others in who can, maybe fill that void, hopefully fill that void, and we'll see. But I think that over the next few weeks, that's still something to be determined, is who is going to come out, as the leader in those positions for that team. And I'm talking like in the trenches.
All right. Seeing as though it is the month of October and we're probably about 10 or 12 days from of the official WAC media show coming out, let's kind of talk the early preseason poll. I mean, if you had to take a vote right now, I would probably put Utah Tech at 1, ACU at 2, CBU at 3, and then from there, I really don't know.
Yeah, that's tough because it is so competitive, and you don't have that GCU to say, well, they're at the top, and then everybody else is going to fall underneath. I mean, even they're at the top, right, with Utah Tech, like it could go either way. I mean, you could put several other teams in there. You could put maybe even CBU in there. I would put Tarleton in the top 3. Man, you can call it bias, you can call it whatever, or wait and see, a few months and see what this looks like then. But I'd put Tarleton in the top 3. I think I'd put CBU in there just because I don't feel like I can ever count them out, just because of that program and what they've done. Utah Tech, I've heard good things, but they've been right there in the middle of the mix over the last couple of years, some experience coming back. So I'm like you. I think it's pretty wide open. And then I don't think you can ever count out UTA. And then ACU is always solid. The 3 Texas schools, it is fierce when they play each other. I don't think that I've ever had a matchup between those 3 schools where it's like, well, this is guaranteed going to be the outcome tonight. It's really always up in the air. So it's solid. It's competitive. I'm excited about the competitiveness.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see somebody going 18-0 through this triple round robin that they're making us play with the teams leaving. I just don't see somebody going 18-0. I mean, personally, for my money, I think it's going to be 16-2 or 15-3 gets it done as the regular season champion by the time we get to March 2026.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, it's going to be interesting there after everybody plays each other 3 times and then you go to the tournament to play each other. So you're going to be sick of each other by the end of that.
Yeah. When I had Andy Penny on, he kind of likened it to an NBA playoff series, right? You get to games 4, 5, and 6, and you're starting to get pretty tired of each other.
Yeah, especially there, at the end when you're heading down the home stretch in those final conference games, and then all of a sudden you got to see everybody again. Yeah, that'll be a different element. It's not like a major change with just a couple teams, but you'll feel it. Like, it'll feel different because of it.
Yeah, what I'm curious to see this year is what the crowds in Vegas look like. Let's call it what it is. GCU traveled very, very well. They packed, for most of the sessions, they filled the Orleans Arena. So without them, I'm really curious to see what those crowds are going to look like, especially during the women's sessions.
Yeah, right. And I guess a lot of that obviously had to do with the size of the school, but then the geography. I mean, for the Texas schools, that's a tough ask, to get everybody out there for that. You'll bring the cheerleaders and the band and the Cowboys and all that kind of stuff as much as you can. But for just like the random season ticket holder, making that trip to Vegas is not as easy as somebody from Phoenix or even from, Cal Baptist or something.
Yeah, because that's a solid 3-hour flight from the Metroplex?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and what is it, like a 20-hour drive or something?
Yeah, so that's kind of what I'm curious to see when we get to March, but obviously a lot to, can happen between now and then. And just really excited to get this last season off the ground. We'll be listening from Southern California, Clayton, and excited to get to that exhibition game against Kansas State. CBU makes that return trip to Lincoln this year, where the Texans gave Nebraska quite the scare there. Was it in the same spot before Christmas that you guys went to Lincoln last year?
Yeah, I think it was in that exact same spot. And that was a great trip, but I'm just looking forward to the fact that we get to have some of those same high-profile games a little bit closer to home.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we had Dan Nielsen on last week, and he talked about how certain, there was one trip in the WAC that ate up most of his budget, and you can guess which trip it was.
Yeah.
But yeah, from a budget perspective, and the fact that Texas has what is it, 10 Division I institutions?
At least, yeah.
12, something like that.
Yeah, at least. And then, the fact that they get to kind of spread the wealth around this year and just take the bus instead of having to take the plane everywhere. It's not only a budget thing, but, it was grueling at times on the coaches and the players and the broadcasters. There was one year, I guess it was, 2 years ago, where we were going from UTRGV, from the very most southern tip of the country, all the way up to Seattle in the same conference. So, that it doesn't come easy. Like, it may sound cool and all the air travel, but it's grueling on a team.
Oh yeah, and this year obviously it becomes a little more manageable, especially if you schedule properly in the non-conference, like Brock and company have. Like Jared Olson's philosophy has been, I don't need to schedule outside the state of California except for maybe 1 or 2 games.
Yeah, I think that's exactly the same mentality that they took. But, with a new coaching staff, it took a year or two to be able to have that freedom and the ability to do that. But I think they've done it. Coach Brock and his staff have done it this year. Now they've got their new digs. I saw their coaching offices. That's got to add so much comfort to the job. It's really state of the art, not just the court, but all of the behind the scenes, coach's office, the training rooms, all that. I expect that to benefit Coach Brock and his squad too.
Real quickly before we close up, is there a worry that, with a bigger arena, you lose some of the, the coziness of like having the band and like the foul play section right on top of you if you're an opposing player? Is there a worry that some of that coziness is going to go away with the bigger arena?
I think that concern is there. In fact, after talking to some of the students and even like the training staff at Tarleton, they're all extremely excited, and they love the fact that they're getting this new arena, and they wouldn't love it any other way. But they've asked the same questions: are we going to have that same intimidating feel? It was like going into a cave or something sometimes when you would play there at Wisdom Gym. I guess it'll depend, right? I mean, it has the potential to be 10 times that if they're able to pack it out, and if the band, plays and roars and that kind of thing. There is some concern about that because it is bigger and better, but at the same time, the amenities put that argument to bed pretty quick.
Yeah, and I think you take the amenities over the cozy. You can make the gym feel cozy. It might just take some time.
Yeah, they'll get there.
All right, Tarleton State play-by-play radio voice, Clayton Neville, thank you so much for joining us on this Monday afternoon, just under 30 days to opening night. Thank you so much, Clayton.
All right, Daryl, appreciate it. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Straight Outta Whack podcast. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and other podcasting platforms. Be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode.